Welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the technical working group for September 2022. We're going to be calling this meeting to order at it is time now 4:02 p.m. Joining us today are staff of the Roundtable: Kathleen Wentworth, Roundtable Coordinator; Angela Montez, Roundtable Administrative Secretary; Jean Rindale, Vice President, HMMH and Aviation Technical Consultant to the Roundtable. We also have present Linda Ozasa, Deputy Director of Planning and Building Department, County of San Mateo; Linda Wallen, Senior Legislative Aide to Supervisor Dave Pine. We also have with us Alana Jarrett's Community Engagement Officer from the FAA, and Joseph Bird, Team Manager, Western Services Center, FAA. From the SFO team, we have with us Paul Hanna, Consultant Chief Airspace and Flight Operation Engineer, SFO; Christian Valdez, Senior Management Consultant, SFO; and Bert Ganong, SFO Airport Noise Manager. Kathleen, do we have anybody else that I missed? I can't see everybody because of the background, but let me look at the names.
Yeah.
And of course, with us
see
from the
anyone
Roundtable membership, with
We
us
have
from
with
the
us-
Roundtable membership, Ann Schneider, and we have with us Brian Perkins from Congresswoman Jackie Spear. We have member Cecilia Taylor, and I think that's all I see. Unless I missed someone, please let me know.
I think you've got everyone, Chairman.
Thank you so much. Okay. Moving on to roll call, which probably we already know what that, but let's go ahead and Ms. Wentworth, would you please proceed with roll call?
For the roll call, Chair Sam Hindy,
Here.
Member Terry O'Connell, Member Ricardo Ortiz. We do not yet have a quorum, and so we will not be able to take any action items at this moment.
Thank you, Ms. Wentworth. Well, that's okay. At this point, we could go ahead and attend to the business that does not need any action. Let's go to the first item, which is the public comments on items that are not on the agenda. This is the opportunity for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. And if you would like to speak, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Montez to tell you how to do so.
Thank you, Chairman Hindy. For those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general public comment periods, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak and *6 to unmute your microphone. When you hear your name called, we will prompt you that you will have 2 minutes. Please note that members of the public must wait for the prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raise hand function. For example, you cannot raise your hand early in the meeting if you wish to speak for an item that is coming up later in the meeting. Written comments that were submitted in advance will be noted with name and city of the sender if provided and posted to the Roundtable website. Thank you. And Chairman, thank you, Chairman. For items not on the agenda, I do not see any hands raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. Angela, I see Bert Ganong is in the attendee list. If you would please move him to the panelist. Thank you. And with us on the attendees, I see Chris Harris, Darlene Yapley, and Vice Mayor Koo, Lydia Koo. Welcome, everyone. Okay, so yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Bert. Good to see you.
Good to be seen.
Okay, so moving on, we're gonna go ahead and skip the consent calendar and setting the agenda, but I'm gonna go ahead and move on to item number 3 on the agenda today, which is the night hush departure. The night and hush nighttime noise abatement departure between the hours of 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. were implemented on May 19, 2022. As you recall, at the last technical working group on July 8th, the FAA reviewed nighttime 1 a.m., 5 a.m. flight tracks and noted number of flights which were, for the reason not fully determined, not flying the night hush noise abatement procedure or other overwater quieter departures. The FAA at that time indicated that there was an issue with the FAA computer process, which is supposed to automatically replace a noisier departure procedure with an FAA-approved noise abatement procedure. And the FAA was going to further review the computer process to make sure flights were properly flying or properly filing for the night hush, and they were also going to look at external factors other than the computer process to report to us explanations for flights which were not flying a noise abatement procedure. And I believe Mr. Joseph Burt gonna be talking about this today. Mr. Burt, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to correct one thing for the record. So we did look at it. It was not a software issue. It was an actual controller issue, which has been addressed. And as we kind of walk through this, you'll see that it has improved. It's still not perfect, but it's a improvement in progress. We're working on it, and hopefully you guys will be a little bit happier with the results. So I'm going to go ahead with that. I'll share my screen and just kind of walk through. I think what you'll see is similar to what Bert has showed you guys in some of the monthly reports that he puts out. What I'm going to show you is the actual raw flight tracks and stuff like that. So I'm going to kind of start out on a black screen, and then I'll go through the tracks so you can kind of get an idea, because it's a little bit easier to see. And then when I get them all up, I will bring up the background that shows basically, you know, the map on the background so you get a better reference. But I think for initial purposes, it's easier to see on the black screen. So, and if you have any questions, please stop me. So if you can see my screen down to the bottom here, that's San Francisco. The top airport is obviously Oakland. The yellow lines are the actual procedure lines for the GOB, particularly, I'm sorry, for NIITE to GOBS, and then up north, but we're not, I didn't include that. And basically the red names that you see are the waypoint names. I just extended them out so it's a little bit easier to see with the tracks. So I'll start here in May. So here's the May tracks. So I included the 050 in here as well. But this is what May looks like. I'm showing 22 that were on the procedure. And if I go, I'm just going to run through night, and then we can go through the stick, and I'll bring that up separately. So then we go to June. There's June, which is the orange. And there was 14 in June that were on the night. And I'm going to bring up July, which is the purple. You can see there's probably only about the same as the week before, or the month before, about 3 or 4 that actually flew the night itself. The rest of them are all going out 050. August is the blue. So again, there was total 15 that went either 050 or night. And then let's go down to September. And September is through the 16th. So it's not quite up to date, but it's the last data pull that I got. And there was a couple in there. I'm only showing 5 total that went to either the 050 or out on the night. So that's all the tracks there. So now let me bring up the base map so you guys can have a better reference of the base map. And then if you give me a second, I'll darken these so that they're a little bit easier for everybody to see. There you go. So that's the night from basically May till the middle of September-ish out of San Francisco. And then the 050 also. Any questions on that at all?
I do not have any. Anybody has any questions on thus far on the presentation? Seeing
Okay.
none.
So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the night procedures and hide, and then I'm going to go to the stick. So I'm going to show the stick, which is right here. And this is the blue. So let me turn this map off again real quick, just so. That's the May stick departure. And again, this is between 1 and 5. We do show these ones, but I'm showing that they departed before 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. Sorry. So there was a lot more of the stick. Then let's go to June stick. So as we bring this up, you'll see that there's a lot more. So in June, there was actually 12 that still flew the stick departure. And then let's go to July. July, there was 14, and 2 of them were kind of abnormal. But I included them just because they weren't on either one of the procedures. And that's these 2 purple ones that kind of go out up this way. And then August, there's 2. So August, it looks like it dropped dramatically. We're showing 2 that were actually on the stick departure. And then September, September, I'm showing 2 as well. And that's these orange ones, or I'm sorry, the green ones on the stick departure. So what was happening is if they put in a flight plan and their flight plan was in the system before 1 a.m., they got before about, I want to say 12:45-ish, they got the original route of flight, which is what they filed, right? So whenever they upload, and that time is a little bit different all the time, but whenever they push the basically the night procedure in saying, hey, everybody that's going to depart between 1 and 5 will now be assigned the night, the controllers needed to go back and basically do a system update. Which then would update the flight plan. So if they filed before 1 or before that time in which they activated the night procedure from 1 to 5, then it would come out with whatever they had. So the controllers needed to go in and basically, after they do the update, they need to go in and basically update the proposed flight plans of the aircraft that are there in the system. And that was not happening on a regular basis. So air traffic got with them, did some training, talked about, that they need to make sure that this is happening. And so that's why I think we're seeing the reduction is we did go back, like the chair said, we thought possibly it was a automation issue with the program itself within ERAM, but we had our guys go deeply through it, look at it. They determined, no, everything appears to be working right. Everything looks good. And then that's when we turned to the controller side of the house and determined that that's what was going on. So again, it's a work in progress. You do have some human error in there, right? Where they may forget one here or there. And, we're just going to keep pressing them. And hopefully at some point it'll become routine. And then, we won't have those human error functions moving forward. Any questions on anything that I showed at all, or anything that you want to see more?
I do have a question, Bert. Thank you. This is very helpful. But I do have a question, not related to night hush, but more like kind of those 2 off flights. How does that happen? I mean, for 2 flights to kind of be way off route, do they need the traffic controller permission, or they could kind of venture on their own?
No, it's probably it. Honestly, I wouldn't be able to give you a direct answer without pulling the tapes and listening to those specific scenarios. But it could be, the pilot was doing something and wasn't paying attention, or it could be the controller turned them. I mean, there's all sorts of things that could happen. So I wouldn't want to speculate as to what happened here. But if we get somewhat real-time information, we can go and determine that. So if Bert sees something, he knows this because he reaches out to us quite a bit. But if he sees something, he can reach out and then we can look at it and then determine whether it was, pilot, controller, weather. There's all sorts of different factors that play into that.
Okay. I was just simply really curious how kind of way off, but that's one thing. Okay. I do have a couple of hands up. Let me go ahead. First, I see Mr. Brian Perkins from Congresswoman Spears. Brian.
So I was wondering if it's possible to put the geography up on this one slide so we can
Sure.
see the land masses for a moment.
I'm sorry, I should have done that. I totally forgot.
Through the chairman, before we proceed, excuse me, Mr. Perkins, Terry O'Connell, member Terry O'Connell did join us, so she is with us today.
Wonderful, thank you. Welcome, Ms. O'Connor.
On some of your earlier slides, and I should have asked my question at that point, the point at which the flights came through the Golden Gate Bridge and came back down, I realize Gobs is a flyby waypoint, but they sure cut it pretty close. And I'm curious about what constitutes a compliant, if you want to call it that, behavior versus one that is cutting corners, basically. So if you go back, I don't know if it's possible to go back
Sure.
to.
Let me
those
bring the
earlier
night
slides,
the stuff back up real quick.
because
Just take me a second.
you know, it's going to make a huge difference at some point if they're cutting it close and they wind up at 10,000 feet over the peninsula versus 14 or 16. We looked at these very carefully in May and June, and thankfully there weren't many, but these that come down that basically come over that Highway 35 skyline marker, for example, that's probably in the neighborhood of 10,000 feet at that point, I'm going to guess. And that's a lot different, obviously, than 14,000, which is typically 12 to 14, which is typically what we were seeing over Pacifica. So do you at the FAA count that particular flight as somehow being compliant when they didn't go even close to Gobs?
Yes, and the reason being is they're flying, the computer's flying the aircraft, and maybe Kathleen might be able to go more into this, but that turn is going to be based upon where their next fix is as to where that system makes that turn. And then what I understand is every system is slightly different. And I'll give you an example. So we have a procedure off of San Diego that for some reason, the British Airways, gosh, I can't remember. Honey Maxwell, I think, uses their flight management system for British Airways and the 777. They make a slight left jog off of the runway, and then they cut back to the first waypoint. And we've narrowed it down to where it is particularly the British Airways 777s, and that it's when they have the Honeywell box in there. So we're finding out that every system in the aircraft is a little bit different in how it functions and operates, because every other aircraft off of San Diego does exactly what they're supposed to. They come straight off, go to the first waypoint, and then make their turn. But British Airways, for some reason, makes that little jog. So I'm not going to tell you that every one of these is aircraft, the flight system. But again, if we have an example, we get it early, we can go and research and let San Francisco know. Was it controller? Was it pilot? Was it flying the system? And that's just the way the system worked.
Okay. From a public policy and just a public experience viewpoint, that Highway 35 marker that you see there is just before a densely populated neighborhood in Daly City. And as it crosses over John Daly Boulevard, and for those of us that know the geography, that is Daly City. That's the guts of Daly City. So if they're at 10,000 just beyond that 35 marker, which is what I'm going to guess they are, it kind of defeats the purpose of this exercise. And so I hope that you could, as further improvement, put it down on your list to consider. That sort of behavior isn't really very beneficial at all. And the behavior that is actually okay is that arrives at 12 to 14. Sometimes they were even going, 15,000 feet over Pacifica. It's hard to hear it at that point, and a much more, predictable, beneficial outcome.
Yeah, over Pacifica, since you mentioned that, we're showing the highest has been 18.
Yeah.
And then the lowest has been 12.7, but the average is right about 15.
Right, but I'll bet that one over Daly City is closer to 10 or 11 at the most.
Yeah.
So,
You're probably correct. I'd have to look at it. I could look at it and let you know, though.
Thank you.
No worries.
Member Schneider?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bert, I represent Millbrae, so my questions are going to sound a little bit weird, given that we're talking about Surfer. I don't think it's this slide, but a different slide look like some of the flights taking off on one, heading up the bay, then do a sharp left turn and come right down over Millbrae. And it wasn't necessary. There are some lines over Millbrae here that I'm trying to figure out. It would be nice to know what altitude there are there, because frankly, we get every departure, and then we've got that noise added on top to other departure noise. So we've got cumulative noise. But then there was another one, and it might even have been the first slide without the map underneath it, that made it look like they were coming fairly soon after takeoff over Millbrae. So what are those altitudes? And if not this map, the other one, the one that was more colors in black. Yeah, see how
You're
a couple
talking
of
about
these
like
are-
this one?
Yeah, that one, or the pink one, or the yellow one, or the green one. Those are right on top of Millbrae.
I will have to look at that. I don't have that answer handy. But I can get it. I can go in and look and analyze the track and find out. But
If
so
you
what
could-
you're wanting to know about is Millbrae, basically,
Yes.
over Millbrae. Okay.
I'm just also pointing out that even though the FAA totally ignores the noise that hits Millbrae, we don't get just the departure noise. We get in-flight noise, we get noise from Oakland. And there are times when you can hear 4 or 5 different sources of airplane noise all at the same time. And that never seems to get logged into the measurements, and clearly not the contours of the FAA. So
Okay.
those slides really showed it. Kathleen, this is something to add on to it's not really ground-based noise at this point, but it's the cumulative impact of multiple noise streams.
Ms.
And
Schneider, just to
frankly,
make
I
sure.
would say if I was the Lord of all, I would say it's bad enough we get all the departure noise. We should have no overflight noise over Millbrae, period. Maybe the Coast Guard, maybe the medical flights into Peninsula Hospital. But other than that, we take the brunt of departure noise, spare us everything else.
And Ms. Schneider, just to make sure I understand your question for Mr. Burt, you want to get the altitude on those
Well, I
slides at
want to
Croft and
know,
Millbrae?
right. And again, this is another case where, as we have learned with low frequency noise, it concentrates in our canyons and valleys. And what happens to that in-flight noise? Because at times, and if we're looking at between midnight and 3 a.m., it can be horrendous here.
So do you see the red circle right here?
Yes.
So that aircraft is currently at 7,000 feet.
So in theory, do we know how loud that is at 7,000 feet?
I couldn't tell you that, no. But then as it gets, let's say goes a beam Millbrae, you're looking at 7,200 feet.
Okay, so much, much lower than say over Pacifica or Daly City, of which I am very partial to both, having grown up and or lifeguarded in those cities. But let's keep this relative. You're coming over Millbrae at a pretty low altitude, plus backblast noise.
Yeah, and I just want to add that this is what has been happening between 1 and 5, and this is what we're trying to fix. So we're trying to take these and put them out overnight.
Understood.
So that's been going on for a while. That's what we're trying to correct is these departures and put them out over the bay, out the Golden Gate, and then around.
Understood, but it might also help explain why at certain times the noise literally does wake us up here, does rattle our houses, does rattle my very heavy brass bed when multiple things are all happening at the same time. And I've never seen it before. This is the first time I've graphically seen what could be happening. So I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Wentworth.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much, Mr. Burt, for giving us these images, and it really helps us see what we're working with. And I appreciate you including a few of those outlier flight paths, because it's clearly those outliers that are the problem as well, not just the ones that are flying even a traditional stick. Just a quick comment on Mr. Perkins' comment about the early turns at GOBS and that British Airways with the FMC strangeness. I think that's a very rare and uncommon occurrence to see in an airplane. I think looking at the early turns at GOBS, they look like they're, what do you say, Joe? I apologize, I'm stuck on my telephone because Comcast took away our Wi-Fi today. But those look like they're turning maybe 6-7 miles before Gobs. I'm just guessing from this little tiny screen. And
Probably pretty close to that, yes.
and they seem to be turning, you know, there's a concentration of them. And so maybe you could take a look again at controller involvement in that turn, in those turns, and see if that's a factor there to be looking at. And I wanted to comment on the 7,000 foot over Millbrae and whether it's noisy or not to respond to Ann. And it sort of depends just from empirical knowledge on what that airplane's doing. If it's gliding down the bodega, it's not as bad as if it's climbing up over your head. And so at 7,000, you're going to hear it for sure if it's climbing. And I appreciate that you're making some great progress from May to September. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's an enormous improvement. And I think we need to acknowledge that front and center. Last comment I want to ask or question for you is, where are you going to show us the HUSSH departures?
I was not, since this is San Francisco, but I can tell you that for the most part, they are way more than what we're doing out of San Francisco.
Way more intrusive, you mean?
Yeah,
flight
there's
paths?
way more flying the HUSSH procedure out of Oakland than there is San Francisco.
They're doing it much more often and
Yes, it's heads
staying
or
on the
tails.
HUSSH, not doing the candle. This is
Yeah.
Bert, by the way.
Yeah, I would really like to see those numbers, see those, just what you did with this on
Okay,
HUSSH, because
hang on, I can easily do
that's
that.
great. Oh, can you? That's terrific, because I certainly have seen a lot of creative controlling out of Oakland for Oakland flights.
So this is all the Oakland flights that
And this is
basically
between
1 and 5.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And so you've got a lot of flights that are coming. Gosh, I wish I could point to it and show you, but if you're looking at the departures and the ones that are not making the sunny departure, which is that wide swath to the far right, but not counting
Right
those,
here.
which is a great departure. But the next swath of, if you put it back, the next group, you may have to make it a
So
little bit brighter.
that's September. So let me go back.
Can you just
by-
put them all on?
Sure. I thought it'd be easier to narrow it down for you.
Oh, okay, whatever you think.
So are you talking about this swap?
No, they're going down the bay as well. I'm talking about the purple in between the yellow you just identified and the sunny.
Right here.
No, it's a dispersed group. Go to right on the screen. And you see that right in there, that's the left-hand side of a wide swath going just about over SFO.
Oh, right in here.
Yeah, right in there. That's kind of swath.
Those look
And
like
they're
they're
going,
all
and
on
you
the
see they have some,
sunny
look for
distributor.
the ones. And look at the ones that seem to be going vertically. There's some, it's not many, but those,
So I did bring up the two that you brought up to air traffic, and those were air traffic controller, and they've been addressed.
thank you. That's all you need to say. That's terrific. So the ones you've just identified with the yellow highlight you just had on, those are ones that are coming off of Oakland and coming over San Francisco Airport and Millbrae area. So what are they doing? That's the question there.
I mean, off and going to Millbrae. Well, I don't know. I don't have all of I haven't gone through and determined all of these. Because like I said, I haven't broke it down like I did San Francisco.
Yes,
Because it's for Oakland. So I can't even tell you if those are for sure after 1 o'clock or just before 1 o'clock. So I'd have
Okay.
to go in and do all that. I didn't do that kind of breakdown with Oakland. But you just mentioned you wanted to see it, so I thought I'd bring it up.
Yes, and thank you. And maybe we can follow up with you and get some more data on that, because even though they depart from Oakland, their pathway takes them over our jurisdiction here quite when they're not on track to a great
Right.
degree. So we really need to make sure that that's being addressed. And as you know, the high level of cargo operations out of Oakland lead to a lot of flights at that time of night. And so we need to, so however you can follow up on it, I think it'd be great if we could get some follow-up data, maybe a couple extra charts or something, you could screen grab them or whatever.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thanks. Thank you, Joe. You guys have done a great job in making vast improvements here. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. Member Schneider, you still have your hand up, or let's. And you still want to speak?
Sorry, Chair, no, have to get used to lowering
Okay.
my own hand. Thank you.
No worry, thank you. Joe, I do have a question. If we take a look at this slide that you have in there.
Okay.
Yeah, just behind what yeah, there we go. So I remember when we were first talking about NIITE HUSSH, or when we're working with the FAA on this, the intent was for all these flights to kind of reach to GOB and then left, or as close to GOB as possible. You mentioned some of it must deal with the software that they use, the flights. Can we determine that for a fact? Because you could see hardly any really reaching to GOB, they all turning prior to GOB. Or what can you tell us about that?
So with GOBS being a flyby, they will more than likely never go over GOBS directly. It'll always be near GOBS, just south of GOBS. So it won't ever be flying directly over. The only way that would happen is if it was a fly over fix. But what I'm talking about with the flight management system is it just depends on the next fix, right? So depending on where that next fix is located based on the heading that they're flying, the system is going to determine when it makes that turn to that next fix. In most cases. Now, again, like I told Mr. Perkins, I don't know that every one of these is that situation, right? It could very well be, because Kathleen's already caught a couple of them. It could very, very well be a controller turn them early. And it could be for a legitimate reason, right? Maybe there's weather, maybe there's traffic. There could be all sorts of reasons why they needed to turn that guy. So I don't always want to make it seem like it's just a rogue controller or a controller, doing it on his own. There may be a legitimate reason behind it as well. With that.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does. So I'm assuming then the metric really is the elevation, the altitude, that basically you would consider that they followed the procedure. If they say go specific at a certain altitude, then that is the intent rather than where they make the turn.
Right. And we talked about altitude, and I think we determined we didn't want to do an altitude. We wanted to go as close to GOBS as possible.
Okay.
And then to answer Mr. Perkins' question, he had a question. Wanted to know what altitude that was. Is he still on?
I believe
right about the 3,500 or the 350. That aircraft's at 15,700 feet.
Wow, that's really high for that short distance.
Yeah. So I'm showing 15,700.
Okay, thank you.
You see where the circle is?
Yeah, that's
okay.
very surprising.
Is that where you were kind of looking at?
Yeah, that's much higher than I thought it would be based upon the others we had looked at. So that's good news, at least.
Great. Thank you, Joe. I see Gene has his hand up. Mr. Rindell.
Gene, I'm not answering any questions. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I think you hit on something. So stay on this graphic here, because I think there's at least a couple that I would think is because of where the next fix is that they're heading to. And especially if you look at the one that you just analyzed, and then the one even before that that's going right over the label Daly City. Those are both going basically to the east, where the others are going more to the southeast. And I think
right.
I think it could very well be the program, how they're programming in that next fix and how quickly they can make that turn. So I just wanted to point that out, that because you mentioned that, and I think those are two examples that are actually heading mostly east rather than the southeast destination.
Yeah, exactly. And like I mentioned before, every system seems to be slightly different for some reason. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, we've
Maybe
seen
it's
that
a
as well.
proprietary thing, but every system just seems to be slightly different. So it's just kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, we've seen that as well. Indeed. Okay. I just wanted to point that out because you did mention about the next fix, and I
Yeah,
wanted to
Joe and
show
Jean.
those two examples.
Thanks, Gene.
Joe and
Yeah,
Jean,
Bert, go
this
ahead.
is Bert. Wanted to comment that we've seen that too. Honeywell to Collins to whatever, that there are different flavors because of the algorithms they use to calculate that. They're all proprietary, of course. And then the other one in, add to it, if you get an airline that wants their own special algorithm calculated for their boxes that they buy, it can vary.
Right. So Bert, while I got you here, thanks for that input. But while I got you here, is there a way, like for the future, that we could show us or display those flights that do not follow the procedure, and along with why they are not doing so? I mean, this is great improvement from what we have seen in the past. Now, May, June, July, and then August. But as we continue to fine tune this and continue to get compliance, is there a way for you to help with the display showing these flights and determine the reason why they did not follow the procedure?
Yeah, we can. I'll coordinate with the FAA because why is sometimes easily discerned by listening to the radios. Other times it's not.
Yeah, and I think now that there's fewer and fewer of them, it's less work for that to happen. So, it might be good just to, while, they're fine tuning it, to try to really understand why they're choosing still to do the old procedure.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Member O'Connell.
Thank you so much, and sorry for being tardy. On this, from this graphic, it looks more that the airlines are being told to turn as soon as they cross the Golden Gate Bridge. Not that they're supposed to go to Gobs or towards Gobs, but once you hit the bridge, we'll turn them. And it would be nice to see if they could go out a little further before they got that notification it was okay to turn. And I'm not sure how that would quite work, but I think it would get more quiet by getting them a little higher in the air. So that's my 2 cents worth. It just seems like the Golden Gate Bridge is the key to where they all start bleeding off.
Actually,
I would tell you, Ms. O'Connell, that is not the case. I would say there may be onesie twosies where the controller might be turning, but I'm telling you that this is driven by the aircraft's flight management system.
Okay.
Again, I'm not going to say every single one of these, because there probably is one or two that are controller, but I think the majority of them are driven by the flight management system of the aircraft. Sorry, Bert, I didn't mean to step on you.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's pretty evident. Can you turn that yellow line between NIITE and Gobs off real quick? At the snap line you guys put in there.
Which one, Bert?
That reference between NIITE and Gobs. Yes, thank you. So you can see the density as they cross over the bridge, and then you have the first set peeling off. And then many of them are actually, no, not many, but there's enough turning east, due east, so that you can see that real quick. It's a matter of, and go ahead and zoom out the screen a little bit, Joe. You'll see that as these airplanes start going to different transitions, the ones that head east, many of them are the tighter ones, the ones that are clustered and then cluster up again and head due south are going to the other waypoints. And then we have the last set that's way out there going past Gobs, and it is further west. And that's pretty indicative of seeing what the flight management computers do. That's what we were talking about with the different flavors of computers and the way they calculate the turns.
And Sam, for reference, you can kind of see that night is a flyby as well, and they don't go overnight at all. They're turning well inside of night. So that kind of gives you a little bit more of a reference of how that works.
Yeah. No, thank you for pointing that out. This really been very helpful. I appreciate it. Thank you. Questions or suggestions from members of the roundtable on how to, collect data 1 to 5, or how you want that data displayed? I kind of suggested or requested Mr. Ganong if he could help us with that. But if there anybody else who has any specific suggestions or comments on collecting data and tracking what's going on. Okay, seeing none from the roundtable. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the public, take public comments on this item. Ms. Montes, would you please take care of that for us?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And I do see one hand raised for public comment, so I will call on Mr. Peter Grace. Mr. Grace?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Peter Grace. I live in Brisbane. I would like that the map still stay, the geographical map still stays up. Is it possible to do that? The map that Brian Perkins had that showed the names of the cities and the flight tracks.
Yes, I will keep time on my end and inform you when your 2 minutes are up. Thank you, Mr. Grace.
As I said, Mr. Brian Perkins asked for the geographical map. This was extremely helpful. Could you please add to the map the city of Brisbane? You will see that and this is important, you will see that the night flights that take off runway 28 turn north. They come straight over Brisbane. An example is August 5 at 2:32 a.m. A flight going to DAL, I'm not sure where that is, came over Brisbane at 4,300 feet, woke me up. Would it be possible for the flights to turn more sharply and go to the waypoint to the east, the same waypoint that the flights off 1 are going to, and make it as a flyby, so it gets them away from, if that was possible. And I'd also like to say, when they come over Brisbane, they're climbing, so they're louder. Many thanks. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Grace. And Chairman, we do not have any more virtual hands raised for this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Okay, very quickly, I'll go back to members of the roundtable if they have any comments or questions on this item before we move on. I don't see any, so perhaps it would be a good idea, staff, Kathleen, if we could follow up with Bert and the FAA on a way to, to monitor those flights that are not following the procedure and determine why. So in our next meeting, we could have reporting. But that's something you could do.
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to help out with that.
I
We can
appreciate that.
report back at the next meeting.
Okay, wonderful. So now that we have Ms. O'Connell with us, let us go back to setting the agenda. I'm going to move back to item number 1.
Through the chair, did we want to take a formal roll call at this time?
Yes, please. Let's go ahead and do that.
Roll call. Chair Hindi.
Here.
Member O'Connell.
Here.
And Member Ortiz. Member Ortiz, not present. And you have a quorum, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to set the agenda and approve the consent calendar, which includes item 2, resolution adopting findings for remote meetings. Staff will note but not read any written comments and allow members of the public to speak. Ms. Montes, do you have any public comments?
Thank you, Chairman. I do not see any virtual hands raised for this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do any members of the roundtable would like to pull any items from the consent? If not, I will entertain a motion to set the agenda and approve the consent calendar.
I make a motion to approve the agenda and the consent calendar.
Thank you, Member O'Connell. I'll second that. Ms. Wentworth, roll call, please.
Chair Hindi,
Yes.
Member O'Connell,
Yes.
Member Ortiz, absent. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on. Item number 4, SFO update, ground-based augmentation system and GBAS 2A concept. Hello, Paul. Good to see you. Mr. Paul Hanna will represent a GBAS update. The presentation, just as a reminder, starts on page 8 of your packet. Following his PowerPoint presentation, Mr. Hanna will provide brief notes on the basic characteristics of GBAS 2A flight procedures, such as whether GBAS is only applicable to approaches or also takeoff profiles, and how many miles from SFO can GBAS procedure operate. Following that, the SFO Roundtable has provided an opportunities for members of the public to directly share with SFO GBAS team their ideas and concepts for possible future GBAS 2A flight procedures. We have been assured that your suggestions do not require any formality or technical expertise, but rather just an idea or concept which can be reviewed by SFO GBAS team. We will adhere to the public comment time limit of 2 minutes per person. If you have any additional suggestions for the SFO GBAS team or need additional time to explain your suggestion, or you want to send in an illustration, you can email the SFO GBAS team at sfo.gbas@flysfo.com. We will also post the email address on the Roundtable website along with the meeting attachment. And Ms. Montes, may I bother you with also posting the email address in the chat if people are able to access? Oh, actually, we don't have a chat. Never mind. All right, Mr. Hanna, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair Hindi. I'm going to share my screen now, and hopefully everybody can see the PowerPoint version of the handout materials that were included in the deck. Just a quick check. Can you guys see my screen right now?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that check. And I assume your response to my question means you can hear me on the audio as well. I really appreciate once again the opportunity to present to all of you here at the technical working group. Myself, Christian, and Bert today will be doing our best to kind of go through the topics you see here on the screen in front of you. So we've got really 4 things that we'd like to cover in particular, and then Chair Hindi, to your comment, we'll definitely have some time to take questions and answer any other outstanding items that we can. So first, we're just going to take a few seconds to remind everybody where we are with the current GBAS project timeline. And second, after that, we want to talk a little bit about where we are with the current noise monitoring and reporting effort that we are going to be undertaking when we start the innovative Group 1 GLS approach procedure operations later next year. And then the third thing we want to cover today is an interesting challenge that we just want to make sure that we identify and share as much information with all of you about, which is the challenge we have of identifying a GLS flight operation and the data gathering about those GLS flight operations that we're undertaking right now. And then we'll wrap up with a little bit of next steps. But as Chair Hindi mentioned, we do have a slide in our handout here just to make sure that we're asking for the best possible information that the residents of the Bay Area and those of you here on the technical working group can provide to us for concepts that could be explored for the Group 2A innovative GLS approach procedures. So as I mentioned before, we'll start just to focus on the timeline here for a moment or two. A familiar looking graphic to those of you that have had a chance to participate in the technical working group briefings on the GBAS project in the past. For those of you that haven't seen this one before, what we're looking at is kind of a quarter by quarter breakdown of in particular, the GLS, or the GLS, of course, is a ground-based augmentation system landing system approach. That's the identifier that the FAA uses for an approach procedure that is enabled by the ground-based augmentation system. So GLS approaches, just like ILS approaches, they're precision Cat 1 approaches here into the airport. And the first group of innovative approach procedures that we reviewed with the public and got some feedback about what the best candidates would be to take forward for FAA procedure development, those are actively being developed right now. This is the group 1 box that you see here kind of in the middle of the screen. And so right now they're being developed by the FAA. And what that means is, even though our flight procedure subcommittee that is supporting the GBAS project at the airport spent a fair amount of time working with industry stakeholders and FAA stakeholders to make sure that we were coming up with designs for GLS approaches that met all of the current FAA criteria. All of that was done to make sure that when we put those forward for review with the public and we calculated our single event noise information to share with all of you through our community flight procedure packages, that they were likely to be as accurate as the same process that the FAA is now using to develop those procedures. And that's what they're doing right at this moment. They're going through the latest criteria. They're reviewing the Group 1 innovative procedures that were requested by the airport for development. And then they're gonna eventually go through the FAA's own NEPA review, which is their own environmental review that is totally independent from the work that we've done ourselves here at the airport and the feedback that we've gotten from the community. So that's in progress right now. Originally, we had hoped that that first group of innovative GLS procedures was going to be available somewhere in June of 2023. That timeline has been delayed just a little bit. And so at this point, we are hopeful that the first group of innovative approach procedures is going to be available somewhere towards the end of the third quarter or the beginning of the fourth quarter. For those of you that really love this topic of instrument approach procedures and go to the FAA's Instrument Flight Procedure Gateway, you may notice that there's a number of those innovative Group 1 procedures that say they're publishing in June. The latest information we have is that they're going to slip a little bit later than that. And so we're tracking something closer to the beginning of the fourth quarter. And that's what this big purple box right here looks like that I'm kind of using my mouse cursor to hover around. So at the point that they are published by the FAA, again, we're anticipating right at the beginning of the fourth quarter. The green box indicates when we would expect aircraft and air traffic to have the first opportunity to have aircraft fly those innovative Group 1 procedures. Equally important, and we're going to spend some time talking about this today, is the development of our GBAS noise monitoring report and our first opportunity to share it with you here as part of the roundtable and the technical working group supporting the roundtable. And you'll notice that there's a difference between the first day when aircraft will have that opportunity to fly those innovative Group 1 GLS procedures and our first opportunity to share one of those noise monitoring reports with you in the public. We are going to talk about that in a little bit, but I'm just going to draw your attention to it now. We'll come back to it in just a few moments. The second thing that we're tracking, in addition to the Group 1 procedures, is the Group 2A innovative set of procedures. And again, for those of you that are new to the technical working group, the Group 1 innovative procedures was the conceptual ideas of what could we do to start achieving our project goals within the existing constraints of the air traffic control system, of staffing challenges, of technology related challenges, and of existing FAA design criteria. We've gotten lots of great ideas, both from our industry stakeholders, from our FAA stakeholders, and from you, from members of the roundtable and from the public, about things that we could explore. However, some of those ideas were either beyond the current design criteria for GLS procedures, or they might have involved a change to the airspace that needed to be made. So they couldn't go into that first group of procedures to help us start kind of achieving our project goals. And so this is our next opportunity, Group 2A, to start looking for those kind of more innovative procedures, ones that have higher opportunities to reduce noise in the area and other opportunities to potentially reduce delays and enhance efficiency. So we're currently working on that as a project team right now with our flight procedure subcommittee. And our goal is to take the best concepts that look like they achieve all of our project goals and exceed some of the concepts that we're looking at in Group 1 and put those forward to you through as community flight procedure packages starting in the first quarter of 2023. So just as we did, over the last couple of years, we will have at least a 1-year opportunity for members of the public to look at those concepts for Group 2A starting in January-ish, somewhere in there. And then a 1-year period through which we are going to be trying to get feedback on these 2A concepts and then work out what the next best concepts would be to take forward to FAA development. If it only took 1 year, if we got lots of great feedback and there were some really clear candidates that stood out, we would request those for development, probably starting in the first quarter of 2024, but we would not expect those procedures to come into reality until late, maybe 2025, possibly even 2026. So that's just kind of a key thing that we want to point out, is that this timeline, it does represent a lot of time, not only thinking about, what are the best procedures and reviewing them with the public, but there's also lots of time necessary for the FAA to develop them, make sure that they're safe, make sure that they pass their own NEPA analysis before they come forward. And all of this kind of leads to something that we'd like to share again with folks, because we've been talking about the ground-based augmentation system here at San Francisco for a while, but we recognize there are new participants here on the technical working group. And really, one of the things we want to share is, we talk about innovative GLS procedures, where we're trying to achieve our project goals of noise reduction, of ILS redundancy, of enhanced efficiency and reducing delays. But truly, the ground-based augmentation system itself is quite innovative, start to finish. And so we just wanted to take a moment, on this slide to kind of help folks understand, how many new things the airport is undertaking, both with the NAVAID itself and with these GLS procedures and some of the other things that we're working on as a team. So one of the first things we want to point out is the acquisition of the GBAS. So this is San Francisco's purchase of the Honeywell SLS 4000 ground-based augmentation system, the GBAS basically. This was the first time any airport in the world has ever purchased a NAVAID like this for the purposes of noise reduction. And to put it another way, lots of airports in the world have ground-based augmentation systems, but it was never their first and primary project goal to buy that NAVAID to try to reduce noise. It was usually an airport's first goal to make new precision approaches to runways that didn't have them, provide some redundancy for aging ILS systems, maybe look for chances at efficiency, and also in some cases find noise reduction. Here at San Francisco, this NAVAID was purchased with the #1 project goal being noise reduction, and that is new and unique in the world. The second thing for us is, as we've talked about a bit, the design of these approaches that are enabled by the ground-based augmentation system. So there's two things that are really innovative about what's happening here. This is one of the first times that procedures were designed by an airport-led initiative with input from the FAA, and the industry and the community, and then converted into an independent noise analysis based on the single event findings and put forward to the public for comment from many of you who participate in this technical working group, but also members of the public, to find the best candidates to take forward. That is an extremely different way and considered to be innovative by most in the industry about how to identify new approach procedures and then take them forward for development. In addition to the approach procedures, though, just the operation of this NAVAID is very new. So it was one thing for the airport to buy this NAVAID for noise reduction. It's equally innovative for the airport itself to be operating it. This is the first NAVAID in the Western area of its kind, not only here in the Bay Area, but throughout the Western United States that's available for public use. There is one other GBAS in Washington, but it's privately owned by Boeing for them to test their aircraft against. So in terms of GBAS in the West, this was the first one, and we really appreciate all of the collaboration that we've had with our FAA stakeholders to make it a success in operations so far. But also importantly is that this ground-based augmentation system is owned and operated by the airport under the non-federal NAVAID program. Again, this is the first time that the airport has ever kind of gone to these lengths. So the key now is that we carry that innovation forward all the way into our implementation and enhancement. So we are now going to be the first airport to ever measure and report on the GLS procedures and the NAVAID's ability to deliver on our project goals. And as we've talked about before, because this NAVAID is owned and operated by the airport under the FAA's non-federal NAVAID program, that gives us this very unique ability to identify GLS approaches that might not be meeting our project goals and turn them off if they're not being successful, in particular for the noise reduction goal. So we're going to be doing this through a complicated process of data gathering and noise reporting. And I wanted to turn things over to Christian to maybe talk a little bit about how that's progressing. Christian?
Thanks, Paul. Good evening, everyone. With this level of innovation, there is no monitoring and reporting process to copy. We're the first ones. SFO is the first airport to monitor and report on GLS approaches from a GBAS unit. So SFO is currently evaluating the monitoring and reporting practices that it will implement once these Group 1 innovative approach procedures are published. One of the things to consider to monitor these procedures are the monitoring locations. Earlier this year, you saw the GBAS measurement report that reported on the United test flights. For that exercise, the airport deployed 6 temporary microphones, portable microphones, shown on the graphic on the right-hand side. These 6 sites are lettered A through F, as you can see. For the upcoming Group 1 innovative approach, monitoring and reporting, the airport would like to use sites A, C, and E as portable sites, and also the permanent site at Foster City, that's NMT number 12. Another item to consider, as Paul mentioned, is how the airport will identify these GLS procedures and work with other stakeholders to identify the GLS procedures. And once the airport identifies them, then staff will actively monitor, investigate GLS approaches that are not performing as expected. The goal is for these Group 1 GLS procedures is to maintain an average noise levels that are lower than non-GLS approaches. And all this will be reported in a way that the public has seen already. And some of the metrics and methods to show this information will be the standard Lmax or peak level, the sound exposure level, SEL, altitude and speed, and then comparing the GLS approaches to the non-GLS approaches. On the next page, you'll see that the future GBAS noise monitoring report on Group 1 GLS approaches will be a hybrid type of report that will show 2 reports that the public has already seen. The Roundtable receives quarterly Roundtable portable monitoring reports, which you can see there on the left side. It's 3 pages of very concise information, about 15 pieces of information that include SELs, average SELs, the average noise levels, complaints per that period, et cetera. That will be inserted into the noise monitoring report per each site. So you'll get that report for each one of those 4 sites or 3 sites plus the permanent NMT. And also you will see the key part of the noise measurement report that was provided to you earlier this year. And that's the comparison between GLS approaches to non-GLS approaches. And something that the public has also asked for is the raw data. Each one of the events produced by the GLS approaches will be as an appendix, similar to what's shown on the right side of your screen. And now Paul will continue on with the challenges of identifying the data, the GLS flight operations.
Thank you so much, Christian. Yeah, so when you're part of a team that's taking on a challenge of innovation like this, there's lots of discoveries that we make along the way, and there's a few slides that we'd like to share with you right now about the ability to gather data about the flights themselves that are passing over these portable noise monitors in the future, and our ability just to identify which aircraft flew GLS approaches and which ones flew approaches that were very similar or identical in some cases. So I think many of you on the technical working group or as a part of the roundtable have hopefully had the opportunity to hear some of the fantastic presentations from Bert and his team about what the airport does to use the current ANEEM technology to look at aircraft flights that have happened in the past and then try to correlate, where that aircraft was, how fast it was going, what altitudes they were at, with existing approach procedure tracks to make that correlation about, well, I believe this aircraft was in this position, so it was likely flying this particular procedure. And then when the team wants to look at specific aspects about an approach procedure, they can kind of connect the dots, if you will, and bring it back together for reporting to folks like yourself. The challenge, however, and this has always been the case, is that when an airport has multiple procedures that are essentially identical, they have the same ground track and they have the same altitudes. As an example, like the ILS approach to 28 right and the RNAV GPS Zulu to 28 right. and our GLS overlay as a good example, it becomes relatively difficult for just the airport to determine what that approach procedure, which approach procedure the aircraft might have been flying. And that's when the airport has to turn to other stakeholders to get a bit more definitive insight on what might have been used. So on this slide, we want to show kind of the three major stakeholders and that are working to try to identify which procedures are being used by which aircraft when they potentially pass over a permanent noise monitor or a portable noise monitor. So on the left-hand side, you see San Francisco International Airport, which we represent by SFO. The method of data collection available to the airport is ANEEMs. And ANEEMs is being fed by data from the FAA swim feed, which is today a lot of great information that comes from the ADS-B out feed. So we're getting really nice kind of data points with information about the ground track, like where they were on the ground, what kind of altitude the aircraft was at. We can calculate the airspeed. It's not something that's inherent in the ADS-B information we get. It has to be calculated here at the airport. We can get noise information where the aircraft passes over the monitors. There's quite a bit of work that has to be done to make sure it's just the aircraft you're listening to. But one of the challenges for us with the GBAS project is that we have to infer whether or not the aircraft is flying a GLS approach. And today, when the GLS approaches are identical to the ILS approaches and the RNAV GPS approaches to our runways, it's not possible for the airport to independently figure that out. And so we turn to the next stakeholder, which is the FAA. And the FAA has better tools available to their team to try to figure out and answer that question. And one of the tools that we're working with the FAA right now, and you've heard us maybe talk about this before, is the IOAA tool. It has the same swim and ADS-B information that the airport has through ANEEMs, but it has additional information. I'm using CPDLC, which is controller pilot data link communications. But it's really, they have the digitized version of the communications that happen between the flight crew and the air traffic controller. And so if there's an approach that gets cleared by name, the air traffic controller says, United Flight 123, you are cleared to fly GLS runway 28 right. The FAA's tool captures that voice transaction, digitizes it, and then throws it into a database that gives the FAA a little bit of additional information to figure out when an aircraft flew a GLS, an ILS, or an RNAV GPS. So when we have difficulty here at the airport trying to figure out what an approach was, we turn to the FAA and use that tool. However, there are times, we'll talk about this in just a second, where only the airlines really know what approach procedure might have been flown. And they've got their own records keeping capabilities. They have some information that's really just available for them for safety purposes, but they've got some great information in their post-flight reporting and their logbooks to track, what their flight crews did in terms of specific approach uses when they're focused on it. Generally speaking, an airline isn't too concerned about which specific approaches a pilot did or didn't use. But in initiatives like what we're working on here at San Francisco, there are some unique opportunities. This slide, however, represents one of our biggest challenges that we're running into. And this is the concept that here at San Francisco, 85% of the flight operations happen under good weather, under visual meteorological conditions. So we call that VMC. And so in this case, I'm kind of setting wind aside, and I'm just saying, how high are the clouds? Is there any fog? So, 85% of the time, the clouds are, quite a ways away from the airport. There's no fog, which means that the highest and safest way for the airport to land a lot of aircraft safely is under this visual meteorological clearance. And that's a very typical operating posture for the air traffic controllers and the pilots. And what happens in that good weather situation is that the air traffic controllers will clear the aircraft to a visual approach. And at that point, it's up to the flight crew, if they accept that visual clearance, to decide how they want to make their way to the runways. In some cases, they might get cleared to a named visual approach, like the quiet bridge or the tiptoe or something like that. In other cases, they may just be able to kind of pick whatever they want, and they may choose to use a GLS approach for that course guidance, even though they've gotten the visual approach. The challenge, though, is they don't have to tell air traffic control that they're using the GLS. It's just something the flight crew knows because they've accepted the visual clearance and they want to use that GLS for that added level of safety, or maybe for our Group 1 innovative procedures for potential noise abatement opportunities. So the challenge here for us is that when those approaches happen under visual conditions, they're very hard both for us to know here at the airport and for the FAA to know about, which means the only people who know definitively under visual clearances, whether a GLS is flown, are the airlines. And so what this translates to here in this table is something we want to share with you about how much time it will typically take our team here at the airport to figure out if a GLS procedure was specifically flown. Now, what I've shown here is on the one side, I've got the instrument approach clearances. So this would be a situation where maybe the weather isn't great, or maybe a flight crew specifically requested a GLS approach by name. So they're talking with the air traffic controllers, they're talking with the TRACON, and they say, hey, today I want to fly the GLS uniform to runway 28 right. Because that's a relatively specific approach procedure, if the TRACON says, yep, you can have it, that has a pretty unique track. We at the airport will likely be able to figure that out using the technology we have. And if we can't, then the FAA will figure it out and help us kind of come to that conclusion. But you can see there are some approaches that are so unique, the airport will be able to figure it out right away. So if in our innovative group 1 set, if there's approaches to the 10s, or the down the bay approach, which is now called the GLS Whiskey. That's the official FAA name for it as it's under development. We should be able to figure that out within about 10 days after an approach like that has been flown, just using our ANEEM's technology. The challenge for us, though, is as we get into these other approaches where there are similar procedures and we need to work with the FAA to get that information, it takes roughly 90 days just to be able to work with the FAA and get that data out of their IOAA system. And then, once we have that data, it takes 90 days, and then there's a little bit of extra time for our team to kind of work with that data to figure out, the rest of what we need to put it into a meaningful report. The challenge, though, is on these visual approaches, and you'll see that there are several innovative Group 1 GLS approaches that there is no good way for either the airport or the FAA to identify. And we're working with airlines right now to figure out a new innovative way that we might be able to track when the airline chose to use those Group 1 GLS procedures so that we can make the most accurate reports. We anticipate right now that's got about a 60-day delay on it, but that's something that's still a bit of a work in progress. So what this is leading up to is we just want to make sure that there's no surprises, that when we get to that first day of operations of our innovative GLS Group 1 procedures, we are going to start working as hard as we can as a team to make accurate reports and share those with you, but it can take potentially up to 120 days between the point at which the first aircraft uses that GLS approach and our opportunity to actually get a report out about what happened in that time period. So we just want to make sure that everybody's aware. That is something that we're going to continue to work on, again, with our stakeholders, the FAA and the airlines, to see if there's ways to shrink that down. But that first report, when it comes out the door, if we're looking at, let's say, an October start, it could be well into January or February before we have that first report into everybody's hands. So that's what we wanted to cover on that one. There is one last slide. I know we're running a little bit short on time, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk GBAS with the technical working group. We've been talking a lot about innovative Group 1 procedures, which are under development by the FAA right now. And just as a reminder from Chair Hindy's comment that we are seeking feedback from this group and from members of the public for any ideas that they might like to have our Flight Procedure Subcommittee explore as a part of our Group 2A innovative GLS procedures, the ones that are slightly less constrained by the current airspace challenges or procedure design challenges. The email address that we'd love to get that information is the gbas@flysfo.com that you see there on the screen. And we have a team supporting the airport here that can interpret quite a bit of creative ideas. If you can just give us an idea, it can be a sketch, it could be a map path, you could tell us in words. And what we will do is we'll take those ideas back to our Flight Procedure Subcommittee, and we will review them with our subcommittee members, which is industry and FAA members, and we will follow the same format as we do with our Q&A, and we will do our best to take any of those public procedure ideas and then let folks know what's become of them. Are they possible concepts for 2A? Are they maybe a little bit more futuristic? And there's other air traffic control technologies that have to be in place. Maybe that means they're 2B, or maybe they're a 3. Or maybe there's something about them that from an aircraft performance perspective just can't particularly work. We're going to do our best to get those answers back. And in some cases, maybe there's a great idea lingering out there and it could be part of that next Group 2A set, but we'd like to hear about it. So please feel free to use that email address to get us the information. Just wrapping up our next steps then, we are here to continue gaining experience operating the GBAS. We're a few months in with our live operation. We're approaching approximately 100 flights that have flown the overlay GLSs, all of which have gone smoothly with few challenges, we're happy to say. We're going to work on our noise monitoring report, as Christian was alluding to. And again, please feel free to submitting any ideas you have for 2A procedures, and check out the latest Q&A. I believe we are now caught up to date. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments from folks.
Thank you both, Mr. Hanna and Mr. Valdez, for the presentation. And I'm gonna jump right on to public comment on this item, and then we'll come back to the members of the roundtable. Ms. Montez, would you please check if there's any members of the public who would like to ask questions?
Thank you, Chairman. I do have one hand raised, so I will go ahead and call on Darlene Yapley. Ms. Yapley?
GBAS 2A approaches. I asked SFO to engage directly with non-roundtable cities as they do at the roundtable. Having 2-minute comments from residents does not qualify as including cities that are most affected, nor does one-way emails. The monitor locations for the United test flights and today's presentation include the most affected cities, such as Palo Alto and Los Altos. SFO has stated many times that it will tackle issues regardless of the roundtable membership. In order to get the official position from Palo Alto and other impacted cities, I encourage SFO to please reach out. This also includes a discussion of the Group 1 monitoring report. At the April 6 roundtable, a motion was made 8-6 that GBAS would be approved with the understanding that robust monitoring would continue in Palo Alto and that there would be criteria that would include both average and single events. The following are my individual concerns, and these topics should again be discussed with non-roundtable cities. Instead of uninterrupted monitoring to record as many GBAS events as possible, virtually all the sites have temporary monitors. The SFO reduction goal on page 5 that was presented says it will maintain average noise levels. The motion required criteria for both average and single events. SFO says it's operating under visual conditions 85% of the time. There's a possibility that neither the FAA or SFO will be aware of which aircraft flew a GLS approach unless the airlines volunteer to do so. This does not seem to be robust monitoring nor following the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yapley. And Chairman, we do not have any more virtual hands raised for this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Obviously, let me start. I mean, Paul, you shared with us the innovation of GBAS and the innovation from SFO. So I want to make a very quick comment on that. I appreciate the fact that SFO's main goal and the focus is reducing noise from GBAS. So that is something encouraging. But you know, as we all know, the monitoring the noise and providing the accurate reporting, that is really what's going to be determining if this is successful or not, or this is the intent is being met and so forth. And clearly it is a complex way of gathering all the information from your stakeholders, but I'm assuming, can you give us kind of an idea? Are they receptive? Do you expect this to be a challenge, gathering the information, or what do you see this going?
So I thank you for that question. I'm a little bit, I'm kind of excited to answer because it's another opportunity to kind of point out how collaborative this effort has been, both with our FAA stakeholders and with our industry partners. So the Flight Procedures Subcommittee has actually spent, I want to say about 5 months talking about this very specific topic, not only because it presented a challenge to airlines today to be able to use and try out our overlay approach procedures, right? Because it's if the airport is operating in that visual condition like it so commonly is, it's very difficult for an airline to say, hey, please stop everything that's happening. I want to try that GLS approach really quickly. It causes delays. And so our Flight Procedures Subcommittee, the airlines who are very interested in using these procedures, getting crew experience, you know, flying the approaches, they've been trying to work out ways to you know, maximize the usage of the GLS approaches in our visual conditions. So the same conversation has also been occurring with our airline partners about, are there ways for the crew members to record this information and have the airline share it with us? Are there other methods that would be less workload intensive on the crew members, where perhaps the airlines could voluntarily share information that comes out of other maintenance and monitoring software that they use on a daily basis. They're all being discussed right now. So far, every airline that is on our subcommittee, which involves United, Southwest, Delta, American, and Alaska, all of them have been very receptive to the idea of finding the right way to share information about which flights were using the GLS and which ones were not.
Great, thank you. While we are at this, let me thank you for giving us the opportunity and allowing the public to kind of come up with ideas and suggestions to the GBAS procedures, innovative procedures. We didn't get much today. I'm wondering if that you are open to perhaps having you come back on the October 6th meeting of the roundtable and give another opportunity for the public to come in with the suggestions or ideas on the GBAS.
Speaking just for myself.
Not putting you on the spot, or did I put you on the spot already?
Well, I have to defer to Bert. You know, I'm here assisting the airport as a part of the team, but I know as you might have gotten a hint, I'm always very excited for the opportunity to talk about the GBAS and the innovative flight procedure. So if that's something that could make the agenda, I'm sure Bert can respond for us on that.
I'm sure we'd be able to do that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, it's just, you know, obviously, and I just want to emphasize to members of the public, this will not be your only opportunity. There are many opportunities. And as stated, you could reach out directly to the GBAS team at SFO at the email provided, and they'll be happy to engage with you, or at least receive your comments and your suggestions. But if there's an opportunity again for October 6th meeting to join us and be open to questions from members of, not questions, suggestions and ideas, that's more like than anything else, I would appreciate that opportunity. Let me go to, thank you so much. Let me go to members of the roundtable. Anyone from the roundtable has any questions or ideas to either Mr. Hannah Valdez or Mr. Ganong? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you both and for being with us and for this update. Moving on, we're running against the clock here. Item number 4, ANEEM update. We will go to item 4B and we'll hear from Mr. Ganong, SFO Airport Noise Office Manager, give us an update on ANEEM. Bert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go ahead and run right into this so that we can stay on track. Okay. And let's see, probably ought to move that over here. All right, so wanted to give you guys an update on ANEEM at SFO. We'll talk about our timeline. We'll talk about some other things. So current status of it, what our validation process has been for it, what we've had to do to go live with it, and a little bit of open discussion and Q&A. Wanted to reiterate what we've gone through to get here, but we started with noise to track, I'm going to say eons ago, but it feels that way. We've used that for many, many, many years. Year and a half ago, well, a little over a year and a half ago now, we transitioned over to noise power distance, or NPD. A bit more accurate, well, actually a lot more accurate, and it uses some of the smarts of ANEEM with a fixed threshold. That's why we have to do that as state of California for the monitors that validate our noise contour. And then the ANEEM, or aircraft noise event extraction methodology, is the newer one that we are using right now. Wanted to show you the old methodology for doing noise event detection. Mentioned a threshold a little bit ago. You can see that bar here is a threshold. And in this example, it's about 45 decibels. The blue wavy line is our noise event. And what we're looking at here is the entire event duration that was captured. It truncates right here. And so as a noise event happens, goes above the threshold, all of a sudden the system says, oh, hey, I got a noise event. It's capturing it. And then as it starts to go below the threshold, it gets into what we call a guard time. So in other words, if the event does what this one's doing, bounces right back and comes back with more energy, a part of that event, it will then continue to record it where it goes below again over here and stays below. It will truncate it as it went below. And that is our noise event up through here. So we get the entire peak of it up through 75 decibels or so, plus the entire duration and time. So we're looking at all the way out to about 12 seconds. And that's the way the system would do it in the past. And then also too, if a aircraft turned right, did a 90-degree turn and didn't actually go to the noise monitor or directly over it under noise to track, N2T2, it would miss it. And so we said that's unacceptable. We have to get a lot better. So NPD started helping us out with that. What we're trying to do is make sure that we got our non-Title 21 monitors over to the most accurate that we could find based on the community input. They wanted to see ANEEM, and we'd been evaluating it, oh gosh, since 2016. So we went ahead and gave the go ahead back in October, November of 2021. We started running ANEEM on our data January 1st, 2022. And the process since then has been evaluating it, making sure we're getting exactly what we want from it. And the reason being is it doesn't reside in ANOMs like the other does, the NPD. So I can't see it, can't listen to it with headphones, can't track it. So we had to get a lot of assistance. And part of the assistance is what you see here on the right. These are what we call high charts. And so for the same period of time, we have what we call a NPD or N2T2 chart and an ANEEM chart. And this is for monitor 2 for a given day. And the time frame we're looking at is highlighted in gray here. We can compress it and zoom in more and do better analytics on it. So what we're looking for is correlations. So when we see these two parabolas intersect like that, we have a really good one. And so you can see where we had our NPD capture these two events, as did ANEEM. It agreed, but we had
Bert,
another.
I apologize. Bert, I apologize. Could the slide get be bigger, enlarged a little bit?
I know this is full screen for me. I mean,
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay.
And so when we're looking here, this one event, it is.
Bert, though, you're showing your notes or the.
Oh,
Can
you're
you
seeing
show
my
the other
note screen?
screen?
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. It's, let's flip flop. Let's drop this share. Start over again. I apologize about that. Here I am drawing all over the screen and doing all sorts of great things. Let's go screen one.
We just wanted to follow you.
No, I understand.
There
How's
you
that
go.
for you?
Much better.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Oh,
anyway,
wonderful. Thank you.
We have here these two events were captured on the left and then two events on the right. Both of them match up, ANEEM and N2T2. But here we have an event that N2T2 didn't capture, ANEEM did. And it gave it a operation number. So we know it's tracked in on that and something that we need to look at because we're not seeing both the parabolas. But the parabolas oftentimes won't both appear unless you're actually running your mouse over it like I'm doing right now. If it was an active screen, it would pop up with all sorts of data for me like this. You can see over here where we have the operation number, the noise event, how far away it is, which helps us evaluate whether it's an actual noise event. So the largest part of getting started with ANEEM was teaching myself and the staff how to read these high charts so that we could evaluate the data. But anyway, we've gone through many months of that. I do think we'll have some fine tuning left to do. Unfortunately, that's kind of the nature of the beast. Did want to share with you guys a zoomed in a noise event detection. So here's what we're looking at is noise events 1, 2, 3, 4. But we see here we have an operation with an operation number. It's Boeing 737-800, 737-800, 2,419 meters away. And so we have this curve here. Well, we have the opposite curve down here. And it's going to say, yep, matches this Boeing 737-800 with 49.5 decibels. And the difference we're looking at is about 3 dB. And the reason for that is the distance causes that. We also have community noise in there too. And so it gives us that and says, yeah, I think this is a good match for you. We'll call it an ANEEM match. And so it's generally the way it works in the simplest form. And we try to stay with that. Nice thing about it is noise events, as people will tell you, aren't beautiful, smooth curves like we were looking at earlier. They're oftentimes jagged events like this, just due to the acoustics within the community, other events, etc. And this is the way we get into it and match them up. Without further ado, Chair, over to you for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ganong. Let me open it up to members of the roundtable and staff. Member Schneider.
Thank you, Chair. I know we're past our meeting time. Bert, we have our next ground-based noise meeting in November. Do you think presentation for this? And if we're only using the non-Title 21 noise monitors, isn't the noise 21 monitors the ones close into the airport? So perhaps offline, we can have a discussion with Kathleen about how to get data that might show the departure flights.
Actually, I'd like to speak about that really quickly. We did do the threshold adjustment starting July 1st, and I saw a sample of the new data, which does a direct comparison with the NPD, new threshold levels, and ANEEM. I was really shocked they're very close. So we'll be displaying that here in the next couple months. I did agree with talking with some of the community members about who had really pushed the ANEEM, that we would be displaying it in the third quarter, portable noise monitoring reports, and should be able to roll out the director's report shortly afterwards.
Terrific, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from staff? Okay, seeing none, let me move on to public.
Thank you, Chairman. We do have 2 virtual hands raised, so I will first call on Ms. Darlene Yapley, followed by Mr. Peter Grace. Ms. Yapley?
Big thank you to Bert and SFO for moving forward with the ANEEM. We're looking forward to seeing the more accurate reports of the noise events in Q3. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Yapley. Mr. Grace?
Yeah, my name is Peter Grace. I live in Brisbane. Like Darlene Yapley said, I want to thank Bert Ganong for arranging a meeting last week to talk about ANEEM and make time with Simon Heath, who is from the company that manages the noise monitors. It was very helpful, as was the meeting in November 21, an action-packed hour. We could hardly digest it. I just wish today's meeting was longer. Let me emphasize, as a member of the public, I see that measuring noise is the underpinning of everything done at the round table. For instance, at the night discussion just now, many were asking what the noise was at certain places for particular flights. No one could give an answer. We should have seen the noise monitor results for those flights 1 to 5 a.m. And I hope the FAA will work with Birkenau to present the noise next time, rather than getting us to accept that a line on a map is appropriate. We're being asked to make judgments about lines on a map without the most crucial data, noise. Let me also say the actual reported noise is what your citizens respond to. As a result of the 2 meetings with Bert and Simon Heath, several members of the public now have a reasonable understanding of how ANEEM works. However, this brief presentation we've just had left me, even though I understand what's happening, pretty confused. I hope that next time slides will be presented before the meeting so we can all study. And I really encourage, I really believe need an
Mr. Grace, we're losing you.
Not only do we need to educate our current members, but also leave a record that those who come after us at the round table know what the assumptions in autumn 2022 public encouraged to have a NIITE at the technical working group.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Grace.
Chairman, we do not have any more virtual hands raised for this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Bert, again, thank you so much. And let me take this opportunity to thank members of the public who were advocating and suggested the ANEEM. Clearly, having proper noise monitoring metrics will be the only way that we could address the noise without having accuracy in noise measurement. Really, we're kind of going against, against the traffic, if you will, or just not going to work. So any accuracy and enhancement in the system that is being used, such as ANEEM, is a great step forward. So thank you, SFO. Thank you, Bert, for doing so. Let me double check before I close the subject if I do have any hands from members of the roundtable for any comments or questions. Seeing none, thank you so much again. And moving on to item number 5, which is to adjournment. But before we do so, I want to see if any members from the committee or the roundtable, for that matter, would like to ask for items to be put on a future agenda. I do not see any hands, and that will bring us, Member Schneider. Right.
I'm sorry, Chair. I do think, and I agree with the public, that we need a deeper dive in ANEEM, and either we're going to do that at the roundtable, which may be difficult, or we keep bringing it back to the working group with enough time to dive into the new ways of looking at it and which monitors. And then if there are issues with the Title 21 monitors, do we need to put in secondary monitors?
Okay. Thank you for that suggestion. And that kind of brings us to the end of this meeting. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who joined us, members of the public, our staff, the presenters, Joe from the FAA, the SFO team, and wish you all have a great evening. Sorry for running behind about 10 minutes, but I appreciate everyone's input and everyone's participation. Thank you to our great staff, Kathleen, Angela, and everybody else, Linda, and I hope I don't forget anyone. I know I'm forgetting something. Let me see, Lisa, and everybody else. So thank you again. We'll see you next time. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.